Welcome to the Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. I'm your host, Suzan Chin-Taylor, CEO and founder of Creative Raven, the firm that helps wastewater industry contractors and manufacturers unlock the power of digital marketing, AI, and PR to boost sales and opportunities. Whether it's through our online marketing and lead generation programs or providing a fully outsourced marketing department, we are passionate about helping businesses in the wastewater and civil infrastructure sectors not just survive, but thrive in today's digital world. Each episode, I'll be bringing you expert tips and strategies to help you grow and succeed. Let's dive in. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. Today, we have the distinct pleasure of visiting with John Soulliere. Now, John and I have a unique history in that we worked on a project for some smart water metering technologies a number of years ago on a consulting basis. But what I never knew, and I guess because it just never came up, is that John had a very long municipal history in the neighboring town at the time when I was living in Palm Springs for Desert Hot Springs. And so I don't want to, give too much of this away, but in learning this, we got into an interesting conversation, and I wanted him to come on to the show, and we're going to do this in two parts because he was part of a very important project for that community. And what came out of that and the lessons that were learned are really evergreen tips that I feel are going to be invaluable for those who are in a situation in a small community, a rural community, or maybe a community where your funding and your financial situation is not as ideal as you would like it to be, but yet you still need to take care of the infrastructure. And John, in his tenure there, was able to come up with some very creative ways to address those issues that plague most communities as we are dealing with aging infrastructure. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to John. And so welcome. And I'm so glad that we're going to be having this conversation today.
Well, thank you for having me. I look forward to it. You're bringing up some old memories because this stems, of course, back into the mid to late 90s when I first started in the industry. And after talking with you recently, I thought, wow, I haven't thought about any of this in so long. And here it comes. And the more I've been thinking about it, I'm thinking, yeah, that really was a wonderful process. I learned so much. I was dunked deeply in wastewater.
No pun intended.
Yeah, in learning. Well, if you can't have jokes in wastewater, then you don't know anything about wastewater.
That's the truth.
It's kind of like being a lawyer or working for a cemetery district. You have to have the jokes. They're just part of life.
Yep.
So anyway, I learned a lot. I learned a lot more about wastewater than I ever thought. And again, it started way back. So yeah, let's go into it. Let's dive in.
Yeah, really. No, again, no pun intended, but like we have to. It's like, come on. I got teased by one person who thought that the name of this podcast was very crass and he would never listen to it. But everybody else in the industry thinks it's absolutely hilarious. Because you think about it, you got to have fun with it. You have to have fun with it. And we do. We deal with a very messy business. It's dirty sometimes. And people don't appreciate it. So it's like, lighten up. We have to not take ourselves so serious in the serious work that the people in this industry do on
Absolutely.
a daily basis.
Yes.
So we who are not going down into the manholes or, not managing and cleaning the plant can enjoy the level and quality of life that
Absolutely.
we do in a nation, in a first-class nation.
Yeah, that's excellent point. And part of our process in helping people understand the importance of managed wastewater as opposed to septic systems and so forth, we began to go into a massive education program where we were in all the schools. And I always look forward to bringing the middle schoolers to the wastewater treatment plant. And certain parts that are like, that's hilarious because you get used to it after a while. But for them to learn the process, I mean, almost like a human body, how it comes in, there's digestion, there's process, and there's a byproduct that comes out. There's solids, there's also water, And I said, so much like a human body, and that all has to be treated right as well. And you talk a lot about money in this whole world, but this whole thing takes a lot of money. I don't know that people understand, especially in California, the regulatory climate on wastewater and wastewater discharge and what's safe and what's not. It used to be that rivers, lakes, and streams, man, they would get wastewater that was horrible. And downstream, you had people pulling out of that water and using it and treating it, of course, but then it would also be part of the water system. And sometimes, if these standards weren't held and these professionals weren't doing their job in the wastewater plant, that could lead to catastrophe. So the regulatory climate, although it is a heavy burden in California, when you step back and look at it, it is so important. And it is so
Mhm.
important how a community manages its wastewater. In fact, it reminds me, I used to share this with the kids. Way back in the Pilgrim days, one of the earliest things the Pilgrims did was outlined a plan for managing their human waste and wastewater so that it did not pollute their water supplies. So wastewater treatment is old, old, old.
Mm.
And heck, in old Rome, there's still pipes over there today that were used for wastewater. And yeah, there's a lot about wastewater people don't understand how important it is to a community.
Yeah.
So we educated the kids, and that was part of it, but we educated the whole community. So if you want, I could just go back in time a little bit.
Yeah, I'd like you to start at the very beginning of, so what were you facing there at Desert Hot Springs
Yeah,
that had to be taken care of? Because I know, when you shared with me, there were many facets to this. It was one, where are we going to get the funding? But
yeah,
even more important, you were talking about education, which is great because
absolutely.
we need to get kids excited about what we do so that we have the next generation coming into this industry to continue the good work that we've all started. But
Absolutely.
then, when there is a big project and there's going to be some funding, but a part of that burden is going to be borne by the community. And so that's kind of like the second piece that you add to, the challenge was, how do we get that community buy-in out of a very economically disadvantaged community? People
Absolutely.
think of Palm Desert, this resort. It was where all the old Hollywood movie stars went. Frank Sinatra lived out there, Bob Hope, all
Mhm.
of them. They all had their places. But what people may not realize is on the fringes within that valley that are adjacent to Palm Springs
Yeah,
are some old communities, but they're very economically disadvantaged. And
yes.
one of them was Desert Hot Springs. And so people flock to Desert Hot Springs for the healing waters of the hot springs. But it's just beyond that, it's a challenged community.
Absolutely. In fact, Desert Hot Springs at that time was the lowest median income incorporated city in the entire county of Riverside.
That's
And we're talking around $32,000 median income for a household. And even in the 90s, that wasn't as bad as it would be
right.
today, of course, but it was still horrendous. And people were living, below the poverty line. But the community had something that was very important to them. And you mentioned the healing waters. And that was their entire economy, the
Mm-hmm.
spas and
Right.
tourism. But in addition to that, there was a dynamic where you had these two beautiful aquifers. One was the hot water, and just south of that was the drinking water. And they were adjacent to one another, separated by an earthquake fault, actually, a splay of the San Andreas. And it sort
Right.
of put a barrier between the two because, the soil, it was so ground down there, it was like clay. So it was like an underground dam almost, even though water did pass back and forth. And so the drinking water was also very high quality. They had never imported water up there. They had always used this pristine, beautiful groundwater. And what happens is a couple of factors. Number one, the groundwater has to be protected. So in the early 70s, before I was at the district, they began to take a look at high density growth that was going on in small sections of the community. And when you have high density growth and you don't have wastewater treatment, that means you have a lot of septic tanks very close to one another.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a septic tank on 5 acres or an acre, That's one thing. But when you have it on a 50 by 100 lot and you have a few hundred of them, now you have the potential for a large plume to begin to go down and infiltrate the water. And if you could imagine a city built on its hot water and spa industry and people start getting sick from exposure to that water, that would not bode well for a community
Mm,
that was already struggling with funding to keep a police department and a fire department and it's all the services run. And so the community voted back in the 70s to build a small wastewater treatment plant, and they formed a number of small assessment districts for the collection system and some of the main lines, collector lines. And when I came in 1994, one of their problems is they had built this infrastructure, but a lot of people weren't hooked up. So they didn't have a mandate to
uh,
hook them up, and it had gone for 15, 20, 30 years. Now, as you know, in the wastewater industry, idle capacity is not as bad as not enough capacity, but idle capacity hurts the bottom line. And when the agency that manages that treatment plant is unable to balance the cost of running that plant because they don't have the hookups that were engineered for that plant, now you're upside down. And you
mm.
cannot run in the red very long in wastewater or water or any other public agency business. Unless you're the federal government, I guess you could run in the red forever, apparently. That's just a little poke there.
Yeah.
But so they had this problem with wastewater treatment plant capacity, sewer mainline and sewer major collection line capacity. And there were all these homes still sitting on septic tanks. And this, they wrung their hands over this. The other part of this that drove the whole effort was that there was growth going on and there was not wastewater available where these spec homes were going in because all
Mm,
these subdivisions had subdivided properties were everywhere. So they weren't being built as planned communities. One of the good things, though, the city did, and the water and sewer agency was separate from the city, and it went beyond the city limits. We touched part of Palm Springs, actually, North Palm Springs, all the way out parts of the county. But one of the good things that the city and the water district did, though, is when the planned communities came in, they said, no more do you come in, just build. You're going to build the wastewater treatment plant. You're going to extend the lines. You're not just going to plant 1,000 homes over our aquifers. So the,
mm.
the development had to bear the cost of that. But our problem was there were thousands of homes sitting on septic tanks up there. So it's 1994. I'm working in the water side. And one day, after only working there for a year, I get a call and they said, hey, we want you to come up and talk to the senior manager and we want to talk to you about something. Uh, the golden ring for that district was, can we ever get all these properties on sewer? And they thought it's just never going to happen.
Mm.
So they called me up and they said, well, we have a problem with all these existing where there's sewer available. They don't want to hook up. We want you to take a look at taking this project on and getting these folks to hook up to the wastewater system. And I'm thinking, okay, getting them to do it, whatever that means. So that was my introduction. The first thing I thought is, okay, I need to know history on all this, but I need to understand wastewater. And so I dove in, and as I dove in, I found it to be extremely intriguing and important. And with the knowledge of wastewater process, when you can begin to break down government speak and process into terms that make sense to the people who would then utilize that, you'd be surprised how responsive they become. When you frame it in the framework of it's groundwater protection, it's not just wastewater treatment. When you frame it in that it's recharge down the line a little bit that can help us. When you frame it in conservation, when you help people understand, I think you and I were talking about it a couple of weeks ago, the holistic look at water, one water.
Right. One water.
People grasp that and they get interested all of a sudden. The second thing is, some people say, "Well, we've had this septic forever. I'm fine. I don't want your wastewater system." They weren't really saying they don't want a wastewater system. What they were saying is, I can't afford it.
Right.
And so you have to read between the lines and find out what the people are really, really need and want. And for us, it came down to one thing. They couldn't afford it, period. Not only could these people who had already wastewater available to them couldn't afford it, but all the thousands that we were looking at to extend the wastewater system to, now you're talking teens of thousands of dollars and not just a couple of $1,000 to pay a contractor to abandon your septic tank. Now we're talking about building everything. So that was the task in 1995. And we started the Make the Connection program, and we started to educate the community. And I just went to management and said, look, we've got to learn how to find money. And when you begin to find the resources, not 100% ever, find the resources to take the edge off, on top of educating and increase the value of those consumers' minds into what they're investing in, help them out a little bit. Now you've got an equation that can work. And I got to tell you, we got those connections made, and we got them down to just the last couple who were just stubborn, purely stubbornness. They just hated government, period. We began to see that success, but the cool thing, the spin-off of that, was the education program we began to take out to the broader public, and the elevation of the water supply. We began to enter international water tasting competitions, and what do you know? We won gold medals,
Oh,
silver
wow.
medals, bronze medals. In fact, I was just on the website the other day, and they had another gold medal they won in 2020, and they've won a couple medals since then. And this is international. And so we elevated the value of this product that was sitting under everybody's feet and under everybody's septic tank. And they go, oh, no. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I began to look at it as a consumer purchase decision. And when you look at consumer purchases, you take a product, and if this product is priced at X, like this bottle of water, now how much would people pay for this? 25, 30 cents over at Sam's Club or whatever. But if it has Boss on the side of it, or one of those other brands, it's
You're
the
right.
same stuff, man. There's nothing special about that water. They'll pay $4. And I realized that the problem with people investing in infrastructure is they did not perceive the value of the product. So we totally changed everything to a consumer buying decision, and not, we want to assess your property and build all this stuff for government to run. That is a horrible sell. And so we began to do that, and we began to look for money. And so in 1996, we kicked it off. But here's where the difficulty began. In 1996, prior to that, these financing districts for public infrastructure improvements were formed by what they call a protest hearing. And if you propose something that included an assessment or a tax, if a majority didn't come and protest it, then it would go through. Well, in 1996, yeah, remember those days?
I remember that. Yes.
Oh, in 1996, Prop 218 passed overwhelmingly in the state of California, which was an extension of California Prop 13, which still exists today, which is a max tax on properties. But this was a change in how these special taxes could be levied. And no more could you say, well, if you don't yell loud enough, we get to build it. No, now you had to have a vote, a public hearing, education process, multiple notifications, and ballots. And if the ballots for the monetary burden didn't exceed, in favor of the monetary burden, didn't exceed those against it, you could not build the infrastructure. So now, not only was it a lot of money, it was a harder process, and it required so much more education. And nobody knew how to do it, because in 1996, we were the first district in California that we knew of that was testing this new Prop 218 public infrastructure process. And so it was very exciting on one hand, but on the other hand, we were like, oh man, how is this going to fly? And I said, well, here's the bottom line. If you elevate value and the price is still here, you're not going to get it. But if you could elevate the value and decrease the price, equilibrium is going to show up. You're going to find that equilibrium where you get at least 50% of those people who say, that's worth it. And so it took so much research. And by the way, 1996, 97, we didn't have technology that we have today for outreach communication and so forth. I'll tell you, I had cauliflower ear on that phone. I talked to thousands of people to explain things. We had dozens and dozens of evening meetings explaining the importance of groundwater, resource conservation, wastewater treatment, value. I mean, I'm glad I was a lot younger back then. We're talking a few years ago. So we did that and we got the first sort of test assessment district. One step, though, I want to include for anybody who's listening that is looking at this sort of process. Early on in the 90s, probably 95, we did what we call a project report that took the entire region and it looked at all the collection system and how it would flow and had specific areas that put different burden on main collection lines, big ones, and all those costs and broke it all out. And we had that project report sort of as a roadmap. We knew the approximate costs. We knew the timeline. We knew which areas we could divide and break up into smaller areas for communication, for vote, for et cetera. And that really began to help us communicate to the consumers what we were dealing with here on a broad scale. The other thing was we spent a lot of time with elected officials, explaining it to them, getting the city on the same page. Hey, it's your groundwater, guys. We're here. We're trying to help protect it. Are you? Oh, yeah, we're on board. Great. We got the legislature involved. We began to knock on the door of congressional representatives, state representatives, and say, hey, you have an interest in this because the cost of remediation far exceeds the cost of prevention. Will you help us prevent it? Well, maybe. We got a lot of maybes. But finally, through persistence, through educating the legislators, we did a few things that were important. We did a piece of legislation that declared a special protection over our groundwater that became part of the state's wastewater discharge law. And we
Wow.
did another,
Okay.
yes, I'm trying to remember the act, but it's the same act now that regulates waste discharge all over the state of California. Oh, I wish I could remember. It'll pop up when I'm not trying. And we also did another little piece of legislation that really didn't have any weight of law behind it, but it was a resolution that said the California legislature is requesting that the Congress consider our request specifically for the purpose of protecting an invaluable resource in a highly economically distressed community. So we had sort of that backing too. That was Senate Joint Resolution 26. And I was involved in both of those. And that was my doorway, my sort of learning curve on getting into the world of legislation. I went to Washington, D.C. multiple times. I went to Sacramento over and over again. We began to knock on the door of the regulatory agencies like the Department of Water Resources, the State Water Resources Control Board. We became so known to them for a community at that time that was like 16,000 people. And at its peak got up to about 26,000 people when we were doing this process. They might have thought we were like of Chicago or something because we were so noisy. You have to be noisy. We were in the halls of Congress. We were in Dianne Feinstein's office. We were in Jerry Lewis's office. We were in everybody's office. And we were good at making noise. And we brought the bottle. We had our water bottle with the gold medals on it. We brought that, said, taste it, man. But the funny thing there, of course, any bottled water has to go through a different process. So it was really our water, but it was treated through osmosis and all that because as soon as it's in a bottle, it becomes food. It's no longer that publicly purveyed water. Anyway, so we became loud and we became clear and we became persistent. And what do you know? As Providence would have it, one of our board members way back in the 70s had helped a congressman get his first elected office. And that congressman ended up becoming the Appropriations Committee chair of the United States government. And he never forgot her. They, they were personal friends. And we went to them and said, look, we have to address this issue. And because he used to serve that community, he was more than familiar with the spas and all that. And we began to get things done. We began to get funding. We began to work with the Army Corps. We began to work with the EPA. We began to look at all the existing grant programs. We began to look at proposition stuff that was in California for clean water. And we tapped every single one. And I've got to tell you, Suzanne, I have never seen it. The entire wastewater project for that whole area, for this 32,000 median income community, was $70 million. That's what we were staring at way back in the mid 90s. That means our goal, I said, look, if we could get half, between 50 and 55%, what will that do? And the people who were advising us and the legislators said that for a community like that, that will take you a long way. So now we knew our price point. We knew what we had to do. We knew how much we had to elevate the value of this up to that, which was that price. We couldn't go below it. Otherwise, we weren't going to get any help. And that's what we began to swing for the fences on. Education was key. Meeting with people. We had neighborhood barbecues, hot dogs and wastewater.
That's interesting because, when you were saying that, this is kind of maybe a good stopping point for a teaser for what we're going to talk about, because I think what you did, and just as a recap, what you really did here was you thought outside of the box. Instead of throwing the hands up in the air, you got very creative in turning over every rock for a possible resource or source of funding. Basically, I don't want to say this, but calling in favors, for lack of a better term, but just really talking to anybody that would listen. And I think, the fact that you weren't afraid is that maybe they weren't the person that could actually help you. Right. But after hearing you, they might have known a person that could help you and help open that door. But what I'm hearing here is that you and your team were just tenacious. And I think when facing this, that's really the underlying thing, is that you must be tenacious and fearless and not being afraid to ask. What's the worst that can happen? Somebody says, I can't help you. What's the best? Well, yeah, I could help you with that. And so I really think you were really staring what was it, a wall, a mountain, like an Everest. Okay, how are we going to climb that mountain?
Yeah.
One step at a, we're going to do it one step at a time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Adversity lends itself to creativity. Everybody thought Prop 218 was the end of public infrastructure projects, but no, it changed the way we had to think about our community. We had to open our doors and bring them in on everything, show them everything. It changed the way we did it, and it changed it for the better.
So that really gives us a nice segue into our next episode, where we're going to talk about how you got the community on board when you were talking about raising that price and getting people for that perceived value. I really want to do a deep dive into how you did that. What was it that you told them in the messaging to get all of that buy-in? Because you got one part of it done. You said you were able to find 50 to 55%, but now the rest was going to have to come from the community, right?
Yes.
And so you were able to get that buy-in and get this project done. So I want our audience to hear what was the other piece of that in that part of the equation. And so, John, thank you for sharing this story. It's really fascinating how that tiny community really just took the bull by the horns and just said, okay, we have to make it happen.
Yep.
We have to make it happen.
What an experience, but my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yes. And I look forward to continuing this conversation and hope you, audience listening, will be staying tuned and tuning in to our next episode of the Doo Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. So thank you again, John. And until next time, keep it flowing. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you're ready to take your marketing to the next level and start increasing sales and opportunities for your business, reach out to us at Creative Raven. We're here to help you thrive in the digital landscape. Visit creativeraven.com or click the link in the show notes below to schedule a call and learn how we can support your growth. If you enjoyed the insights on today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe so you'll never miss an update. Until next time, keep growing and keep it flowing.